I'm also recording this. What's up? Soha will answer no? Soha has gone silent.
I will answer what?
Ammonia. How do we test for ammonia?
8 minutes.
Sure. Are you looking at your notes? Gasse. That's French for gases. We are studying gasse. Gas.
Yes.
Gas. You misspelled it. Gas. Sodium hydroxide, says Saad Mahmood. Yeah, ammonia will turn red litmus paper blue if you bring a damp litmus paper near it, right? It's a alkaline gas. ठीक है. Now, I'm spending a lot of time on this because it's kind of important and it goes directly in complementing ions. I also shared the worksheet with you guys. Ira, especially for you, you know, like you were asking, sir, कैसे सवाल आते हैं? बड़ी परेशान हूँ मैं. Or like you didn't say that, but yeah, so all the questions which are related to precipitation reactions, वो सब डाल देना. There are about quite a few questions. I was surprised. I didn't expect that many. ठीक है. Anyway, so ammonia का test होता है, it turns red litmus paper, red litmus blue. I'll just write that for, you know, but you know the entire thing. Damp red litmus paper, blue. ठीक है. Sulfur dioxide का भी कर लेते हैं. कोई बता दो sulfur dioxide का, if someone knows. Fatma might just be the only student in the hall.
KMNO4.
KMNO4, absolutely brilliant. Sulfur dioxide is easily oxide, so if you pass it through aqueous KMNO4, it'll show a color change of purple.
Purple to colorless, orange to green.
Yeah, purple to colorless if it's KMNO4. Orange to green is potassium dichromate. Achha, potassium dichromate is K2Cr2O7. Achha, this is not in your syllabus anymore. But you'll see 2019 तक ये आपके questions में दिख रहा होगा ना आपको. तो I mean, I just keep adding it orange to green. But if you have to pick one out of the two if you want to know, this is the one. Potassium dichromate will show up in your A levels anyway, but if you don't remember it, don't worry too much about it. But why I tell you guys is, I want to relieve your anxiety because questions आप करेंगे 2019 तक के, वहाँ पे जहाँ पे भी potassium dichromate आएगा, you won't be able to solve it, and it's hard to, you know, gain confidence when you see some stupid stuff like that. And if I remove those questions, then we'll have too few questions. So, hey, take care. So we have a general idea. So I'll go over gases real quick. Chlorine will bleach litmus paper. Any litmus paper, damp litmus paper, chlorine will bleach it. Ammonia will turn blue. Sulfur dioxide turns it red, but we don't generally test it with that. It's acidic, sulfur dioxide. But what you do is you dip paper in potassium magnate, aqueous potassium magnate, and वही ना litmus paper की तरह करीब लाते हैं test tube से. So it'll turn blue. Or otherwise, if you have too much gas producing, pass it through KMNO4 aqueous underwater bubble करके ना, it'll turn colorless. ठीक है. Oxygen is realize a glowing splint. Hydrogen makes a popping noise. This is when exposed to open flame or a glowing splint. Any other gas I'm missing? Sorry gases होंगी. Carbon dioxide turns lime water milky because it forms a precipitate in lime water. I say precipitate for your understanding, but you'll always say turns lime water milky. Lime water is calcium hydroxide. Say, easy peasy, Japanesey. Okay, now we're going to talk about ions. Achha, there are two things we majorly do. Either we react substances in a certain way, react them, and force them to produce a gas. Force them to produce a gas, then we can test the gas and identify it, produce a gas. ठीक है. A really good example is calcium carbonate. If you want to test for the carbonate, any carbonate, I'm just putting calcium over here, you react it with a dilute acid, and it could be any acid, normally hydrochloric acid or nitric acid. That's what they go for, because I'm just thinking they're cheap for any, unless I don't think there's any other reason. So it will produce a salt that dissolves. Water. Is it water? Yeah, right? And carbon dioxide. and this gas comes off, and you can test for this gas. If you test for this gas, ये confirm हो गई, so you know कार्बोनेट आयन था. कैसे पता कार्बोनेट आयन था? भाई मैंने एक चीज़ में एसिड डाला, you know, और उसमें से जो गैस निकली कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड. सिर्फ हमेशा कार्बोनेट ही एसिड से रिएक्ट करता है तो कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड प्रोड्यूस करता है. तो वहाँ पे कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड होना, कार्बोनेट आयन होना ज़रूरी है, राइट? सो यू कन्फर्म दिस अननोन सब्सटेंस इफ यू डिडंट नो इट्स आइडेंटिटी हैज़ CO3 2 minus ions, because carbonate ions has a 2 minus charge. ठीक है, does this make sense to people? You know, आपके घर में कभी लोग आते हैं, you know, your friends are over, यार तुम्हारी अम्मी खाना पका रही हैं. How do you know? If you're in a room, if you don't see the mom, if you don't see any cooking thing, you can tell just by the smell of it. You can tell exactly what's being cooked if you're a little more familiar with the food kind. Oh, biryani पक रही है आपके घर में. Oh, nice यार. You know? You can smell it, you can smell the biryani, your brain goes like, this particular smell is always there when I see biryani. It smells exactly like biryani. So it has to be someone is either eating biryani in the room or someone's cooking it. I'm so sorry, Rosa, I'm so sorry. Okay, but I'll end my example there. So you're indirectly testing for something is what I'm trying to say. You know, आपको, you know, कैसे पता है सूरज बाहर है? You can either look at the sun and go blind, right? Or you can look down, or like, I mean, if you want to, you know, be a little more bad example, but you look down and if you see a shadow, you know, you go like, oh, the sun is out because my shadow is there. Someone's Ashwin has a cross on it. Any Ashwin says something? Kushbu, what? I don't know. Ashwin, all good? Okay, now you guys understand this, hopefully. So we're going to learn about testing for ions. So one way is this, the other way is do a precipitation reaction. Precipitation reaction. A precipitation reaction is a compound that is soluble that reacts with another compound that's soluble that produces something insoluble plus something that is soluble. ठीक है? And this insoluble thing is the solid that forms as the precipitate, right? And this looks kind of complicated, but essentially what you're doing is, जैसे यहाँ पे आप gases से identify करते हैं, यहाँ पे compounds की insolubility से करते हैं, right? What's a good example for this? Something you might know. I don't know. I don't know if you guys are familiar, but one very good thing comes to mind is sulfate ions. Sulfate ions are considered generally soluble. Generally soluble. That means any compound they're with, calcium sulfate, वगैरह सब कुछ, okay, not calcium sulfate because that is one thing that's not soluble with, but copper sulfate and even sulfuric acid, and they're all soluble. Now, very few compounds like calcium ions, if it's bonded to a calcium ion, it's insoluble. If it's bonded to barium, it's insoluble. If it's bonded to lead, it's soluble. Now, calcium, I think, occurs too frequently in the lab because इसका cation generally calcium भी हो सकता है. So they try to avoid calcium. A really good choice to test for sulfate ion is barium. So they choose a product that is soluble in water and has barium ions in it. And here's an example. Copper sulfate aqueous will be a blue solution, and then there is barium nitrate, which is also a colorless solution. If you react it, what's going to happen is a precipitation reaction will occur where barium sulfate is formed and on the other side copper nitrate is formed. ठीक है? Now copper nitrate, I'm telling you for now, is aqueous, so ये कुछ दिखता नहीं है, But barium sulfate, like I said, sulfate के कुछ products insoluble होते हैं, and barium is a well-known, barium sulfate is a well-known insoluble substance. So barium sulfate will form a solid precipitate, and the color for this precipitate is going to be white. Can someone tell me why it's going to be a white precipitate? Ashwin says ये वाला फिर से है, the sulfate ion का पिछला वाला. Okay, let me just complete this train of thought, then we can go to the पिछला वाला. Can someone tell me why barium is white? Precipitate to chalo, I'm telling you guys. Why is it white? Something I alluded to in our last class or classes. Because, Soha says, because only blank metals have colors. Because it wants to. ठीक है. Who knows the answer for this? Blank metals will have colors. Padda. Transition. Only transition elements have colors. Now barium, if you look at the periodic table, you don't know this because barium is right at the bottom of group 2. And another hint was that it's a 2+ ion. Actually, they're all 2+ ions. But, I mean, this is also group 2 coincidentally. ठीक है. Barium is group 2. It's not a transition element, so it has to be a white precipitate, if it's a precipitate. Shh, snake. Does this make sense? So quite literally, if you add barium to anything sulfate, it will form a precipitate. And you go like, oh, it has to have a sulfate ion. So either you choose to test for a gas or you test for precipitation reactions. Now precipitation reactions में कहीं precipitate होगा, कहीं नहीं होगा. इसके पता होने से आपको पता चल जाएगा exactly ion कौन सा है. दूसरा चीज़ आपको बता रहा होगा precipitate का color. Some precipitates have distinct colors. They're all क्या बोलते हैं, transition elements. So I एक दो क्या. And we'll just take a closer look. Now before we begin, there are certain things we want to revise from our periodic table things. One is, let's get some better colors. All group 1 sols are, like, by all I mean like 99.99% germs, right? 99.99%. Most, if not all of them, all group 1 sols are soluble in water. ठीक है. Does this make sense? If it's a group 1 salt, sodium sulfate, is it soluble? Yes, because it's sodium, group 1 का salt है. Sodium chloride? Yes, group 1 है. Calcium chloride? I don't know. But group 1 का नहीं है, calcium group 2 में? I'm not sure. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, who knows? Right? It is soluble, वैसे, I just know it from Ratta. Group 2 are generally soluble as well. But group 1, ये आपको पता होना चाहिए, are generally soluble. Any salt with the ammonium ion is also soluble. So all ammonium salts are soluble. Now ammonium is one salt one ion we're doing which has a positive charge. We'll look at all anions today, negatively charged ions. ठीक है. What's after this is all nitrates are soluble. In the previous example, there was it wasn't a coincidence. I was using nitrates. ये क्या हो रहा है? Who's dropping in, dropping out? ठीक है. All nitrate ions are soluble. OH compounds are slightly soluble. ठीक है. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't, or maybe they're partially soluble. One really good comparison you can make is between sodium hydroxide and let's say calcium hydroxide. ठीक है. Which of the two do you think is soluble, and which of the other one do you think is insoluble or slightly soluble? Sodium hydroxide, you should say with a good amount of confidence, is soluble for more than one reason. Sodium hydroxide, you've seen in practically every titration hoti hai, usme sodium hydroxide hota hai. You've seen it in aqueous form, whereas you've barely seen calcium hydroxide as a solution. ठीक है? And the other thing on this list I've given you is telling you that it's very likely soluble is that all group 1 salts are soluble in water. This is a group 1 salt. And of course, it will be soluble. This is a group 2 salt, so we don't know if it's soluble or not. But most OH compounds are slightly soluble. So this will be either be insoluble or will tell you it's partially soluble. And calcium hydroxide, you can be certain, is partially soluble. Does this make sense to everyone? Okay. That's the idea. And some more facts. You guys would know this because I keep talking about this a lot. All carbonates are what? Insoluble. They do not dissolve. ठीक है, ये तो सबको पता होगा, I think. Ashwin, can you ask your question again? I'll just go back. I forgot you asked a question. I'll just go back after writing all of this. Silver Ag plus salts are all insoluble. इसके 2-3 हम reactions देखेंगे. We'll use this insolubility of silver के salts to identify a few. ठीक है. Now, silver salts, but if it's a silver nitrate, that's soluble because all nitrates are soluble, right? Silver nitrate is used a lot, so silver nitrate aqueous. क्या होता है? I think just यही होता है, AgNO3. It doesn't look right. Silver हाँ positive ही होता है. ठीक है. AgNO3 aqueous. ठीक है. This is used a lot in our salt analysis. So this is aqueous. What more I should add is most sulfates are soluble. Some exceptions are barium. Barium is the important one, but other things you should know are calcium sulfate is insoluble and आपका lead sulfate is insoluble. Barium is used to test for sulfate ions like we saw. ठीक है. अब मैंने, it was no coincidence, I used barium, nitrate, it was aqueous, और वो मैंने sulfate के solution में डाला, तो it formed a precipitate, which was BaSO4. And I identified the sulfate ion. ठीक है. Okay. Now Ashwin had a question over here, I believe. The first one, yes. Ask your question. What's with the dropping out? Bad internet for everyone? समझ नहीं आया. I wish you could ask the question. So the idea is a precipitation reaction is two soluble compounds that react with each other, and जो भी उनका product बनता है उनमें से एक soluble or insoluble होता है, and that's the thing that forms a precipitate. That's the idea, right? So this is just an abstract way of writing what a precipitation reaction is. Two solutions react together where one is a solid. Like if I go back to our last one, we were looking at contact process क्यों आ गया? Where's our last? Okay, I guess it's not here. Oh well. Nice. Yeah, I don't have the last thing. ठीक है, but any like precipitation being formed, I say if you don't get it, don't worry about it too much. It's just a solid forming, and we'll see so many of these reactions. You'll be like, oh, acha, okay, fine. ठीक है, ठीक है. Practically shooing your question away, but I think you'll get a really good idea real soon. ठीक है. Any questions so far from anyone else? These points, go over it, guys, and if you know this, it's going to help you a lot. ठीक है. So by Thursday, if you guys know all of these points, if I say, I used calcium nitrate, or if I ask you to write down calcium nitrate, you'll say, oh, calcium nitrate is going to be CaNO3 twice, aqueous. Why? Because all nitrates, no questions asked, are soluble. ठीक है, इस टाइप के सवाल. If there's AgCl3, or AgCl, not 3, you know it's a solid. Why? Because we just talked about silver के compounds being solids. ठीक है. By Thursday, I hope try, go it once or twice, and you should be able to confidently go okay, this compound है, वैसे ये होना चाहिए. ठीक है. Okay, let's move on. Because this is, if we know this, the next part is going to be a little more straightforward. ठीक है. So here are all the anions we have to test. Yeah. Well, most of the anions. Here's one cation as well. So there's the carbonate ion. There's the chloride and the iodine ion. There was also bromine here, but they removed it. There's the sulfate ion, which we saw the test for, and the nitrate ion. ठीक है. First one, you guys know, you reacted with an acid, and you're looking for carbon dioxide. If carbon dioxide is produced, how will you identify it? By passing it through lime water, it'll turn it milky. So that will confirm the presence of carbonate ions. ठीक है. So how would you write this? If you had to write it, no one will write it, aside from Fatma. Fatma will go, okay, add hydrochloric acid to the solution which possibly contains carbonate ions. If a gas is evolved, if a colorless gas is evolved, which turns lime water milky, carbonate ions were present. ठीक है. Now this you already know and are confident with. The sulfate ion is the next one. Sulfate ion could be anything as long as it's a solution of sulfate ion and you're testing for it. You add barium nitrate to it. In some places you'll see barium chloride as well, which is completely fine. Aqueous, aqueous. Or, ठीक है. And what you do is you put a bit of acid or an alkali with it. I can't recall which, but I think it's with a bit of acid as well. But as soon as you see barium, that's just the test for a sulfate ion. And if you see a white precipitate forming, which is going to be barium sulfate, you don't have to know, you just have to identify the result, or you don't have to ever comment on it. That's a positive test for the sulfate ion. I'll just write it in bracket that this is a. Anyone following so far? I have a feeling people are like, what is going on? I think at one point, people are going, what is going on? Soha, what's up? Ashwin, what's up? Ira? Lost? Or are we getting it?
No, I
Got it? Ira? Ira's more honest than Soha. Fatma says no, sir. Zone out हो जाते हैं आगे क्या करना? Ashwin says, Fatma says no, sir. Is like no, sir. I don't get anything. No, sir. I get everything. So it's a kind of a open-ended no, sir to me. Oh, you got it? Great. ठीक है. But I think Fatma, you already kind of more or less knew this or are working actively towards it. So it's more revision. ठीक है. अच्छा. Normally gases produce करते हैं. Chloride and iodine के लिए you don't produce gases. What you do is you react it with silver nitrate. Silver nitrate is soluble. I was just talking about it. Why do I keep saying AgNO3 twice? But I'm confident it's just going to be AgNO3. Let me just Google silver nitrate. What's the chemical formula for silver nitrate? I think it's AgNO3. Yeah, it's AgNO3. Why do I keep putting the bracket there? Because silver has a plus charge. I don't know. Just whenever I see NO3, I want to put a bracket on it and put 2. You know? Okay. You reacted with AgNO3, which is aqueous. अब यहाँ पे क्या हो रहा है? Silver, their salts are insoluble, but with AgNO3, AgNO3 is the only silver salt that's soluble, right? So right now this is a colorless solution. You mix it with chloride ions, which is potassium chloride होगा, कुछ भी होगा, NaCl होगा. You mix it with it, and that's also colorless. You mix it, all of a sudden क्या होता है? Silver reacts with the chlorine to form AgCl, which is a white precipitate. And this is the confusing part. आपने AgNO3 डाला तो white precipitate दिया तो आपको पता चला क्लोरीन है, लेकिन आपने बेरियम नाइट्रेट डाला और उसमें white precipitate आया तो think about this way. अगर आपने कॉकरोच का पॉइजन डाला और कॉकरोच मर गया or like something died, you're probably thinking, oh, a cockroach died, right? And if you put rat poison out and someone tells you, oh, there's something dead outside, not identifying what it is, you're probably thinking, oh, a rat probably died because the thing I used was to kill a rat. And previously what I used was to kill a cockroach, right? Now I know वो थोड़ा आगे पीछे होता है, but it's a little more strict over here. Barium nitrate is strictly precipitates with sulfate ion के presence में. Barium nitrate will precipitate. So every time you add barium nitrate, sulfate ion will form a white precipitate. तो आपने टेस्ट क्या किया था? And this is the positive result of the test. फिर आप क्लोराइड के आयंस के टेस्ट कर रहे थे तो आपको white precipitate मिला. तो silver nitrate tests for chlorine and iodine. Iodine के तो अभी बात नहीं की, but chlorine का, right? So white precipitate. So I won't say it's going to be sulfate ions because that also forms a white precipitate. I'll say silver nitrate is only precipitates because of chlorine, so it will form a white precipitate if chlorine is present. So if I see white precipitate, on a scale of 1 to 10, are you guys done with the word precipitate already? Because I've said it like 20 million times.
No.
Yeah, okay. Abhi stamina hai. ठीक है, okay. Now iodine is the exact same test. You add silver nitrate. So some common themes here. Silver nitrate aqueous. It forms a precipitate which is AgI. And how this is different is it's actually a yellow precipitate. A very clear indication. There's no other yellow precipitate in our syllabus aside from iodine reacting with silver, right? So you see yellow precipitate, you know somewhere somehow iodine was present. ठीक? हाँ, identification of ions ही कर रहे हैं हम पिछले 2 दिन से. Iodine, right? Iodine is like you should be confident. ठीक है. Now nitrate ions का precipitate होता नहीं है because they're all soluble. Nitrate ions, because यहाँ पे देखो हर जगह nitrate भी use कर रहे हैं, and I've told you this. If anything is कुछ होता है या नहीं होता, nitrate ions are soluble. All nitrate ions are soluble. ठीक है, तो इसका precipitate reaction नहीं कर सकता. इसको हम react कर सकते हैं और इसके अंदर सोडियम हाइड्रोक्साइड डालते हैं या कुछ डालते हैं तो it forms nitrogen dioxide which is a brown gas and you can test for it. But there is a huge problem, humongous problem कि अगर आप इसमें NaOH डालेंगे it will turn into nitrogen dioxide and it's a very distinct brown gas. So if you see brown fumes coming out, you'll say, oh, इस टेस्ट ट्यूब में नाइट्रेट आयन से क्योंकि मैंने जैसे ही ये केमिकल डाला नाइट्रोजन डाइऑक्साइड प्रोड्यूस होने शुरू हो गए. Why is that a fundamentally or incredibly bad idea? Why do you think so? Why is that a what idea, sir? भाई मैं नाइट्रेट आयन का इस तरह टेस्ट कर सकता हूँ, एक मैंने कोई केमिकल डाल दिया, आई थिंक NaOH डाल दो तो सोडियम हाइड्रोक्साइड बन जाएगा, ओ सोडियम डाइऑक्साइड, नाइट्रोजन डाइऑक्साइड बन जाएगा, राइट? तो ये नाइट्रोजन डाइऑक्साइड हैज़ अ वेरी डिस्टिंक्ट ब्राउन कलर, सो आई कैन क्लियरली आइडेंटिफाई दिस नाइट्रोजन डाइऑक्साइड के भाई ब्राउन गैस निकल रही है तो ये नाइट्रेट आयन होगा. व्हाई इज दैट अ रियली बैड आइडिया? Ira says great idea, Ashwin says great idea. My question is why is that a bad idea? बड़े यार क्रैकपॉट्स हो तुम लोग, क्रैकपॉट्स हैं तुम्हें लोग. Anyone Madrasi here? I'm Madrasi. You get that reference? अरे तुम्हें लोग हैं सब क्रैकपॉट्स हैं. अरे जवाब दो ना, मुझे नहीं पता तो नहीं पता बोलो ना यार.
Nobody wants to answer.
हाँ, no one wants to answer. हाँ पता नहीं क्या है यार, मैं तो तंग आ गया यार. अच्छा तंग तो बहुत पहले आ गया था, अब तो लाइक screw it वाली बात. The issue is if you don't recall,
Answer.
हाँ someone answered, Fatma answered, sir I did. वो सब इतनी बकवास कर रहा था ना, मुझे समझ नहीं देखा ही नहीं क्या फातिमा, because iron 3 is the same color. Iron 3 ions will not be a gas, so that would be different. So Fatma saying iron, there's another test for iron which forms a brown precipitate. We'll talk about it later, but that's also brown, but that's a brown solid versus a brown gas, so you can tell the difference between a gas and a solid. The reason is nitrogen dioxide is incredibly poisonous, people. Right? We were doing nitrogen and sulfur के theory. उसमें I kept saying nitrogen dioxide is very poisonous, right? Very toxic gas. So if you know, oh brown gas आ रही है, you know, you're dead. So you don't want to do that. So what they do is they try to heat it with sodium hydroxide with aluminum present. Now there's a big reaction going on, but with the presence of aluminum, क्या होता है, बड़ा complicated reaction होता है, and it's in the book and you can open it, वो मैं अभी दिखा भी सकता हूँ, but essentially it's not in the syllabus, it's not important, but उससे होता ये है, with the aluminum ion present बहुत 3-4 products बनते हैं, उनमें से एक गैस बनती है which is ammonia. Once this is formed, you can easily test for that ammonia. So this is a safer way of testing the nitrate ion, and no one goes the other way, right? To test for nitrogen dioxide. Does this make sense? Does these make sense? So what you try to do is force ammonia. अब ज़ाहिर सी बात है इन चीज़ों में तो अमोनिया नहीं निकलेगी, right? Now एक और ion है which produces ammonia when you add NaOH to it. It'll eventually produce ammonia. Whatever the reaction goes, sodium hydroxide will react with, let me copy this and bring it here because they're so similar. ठीक है. Ammonium ion will produce NH3 when you heat it with sodium hydroxide. ठीक है. Now ammonium ion क्या करता है? Produce करता है ammonia सिर्फ NaOH डालने के बाद. You of course you heat, most reactions over here are heated, but that's not important. No extra detail है. The question may have it, may not have it. But if you add just sodium hydroxide to it, if a gas is evolved that turns red damp litmus paper blue, you know it's the ammonium ions. If nothing happens, then you don't know, then you're confident ammonium ion isn't there. Then what you do is उसके अंदर aluminum डालते हैं और फिर उसे दोबारा heat करते हैं. फिर अगर अमोनिया निकली तो you know nitrate ion था. समझ आया? ठीक है, yeah, I think it's very straightforward, but this is the thing people get confused in the most, but no one's taking P4, right? but I can only teach it like if I was teaching it a P4 paper. But these are these two things, the sulfate thing and the two chloride things will be mostly tested in your MCQs. That's what I've seen so far. ठीक है? So see these two reactions as one pair. पहले आप NaOH डालेंगे, you know, litmus paper डाला, कुछ भी नहीं हुआ. कुछ हुआ तो ammonium ion थे, because litmus paper has detected ammonia, right? तो ammonium ion थे. But if you add aluminum, right? And aluminum is not acting as a catalyst or anything, it actually takes part, gets used up in the reaction, बड़ा reaction होता है. And if ammonia is then produced, then you're like, oh, nitrate ion थे इसके अंदर. These two are together as one pair. Silver wale do reactions are together in one pair. Because with the same reaction, you either get a white precipitate or a yellow precipitate. Testing for your halide ions. Halide are halogen ke ion. ठीक है. Sulfate, this is probably the most, एक दो बार इसको गलत करने के बाद, you know, no one confuses this. And I think बच्चा जब पैदा होता है ना, उसे कार्बोनेट का टेस्ट पता होता है. Because it's so, we've seen it so many times. I don't think anyone will ever confuse turning lime water milky with anything else aside from a carbonate ion. ठीक है. So carbonate ion का test, chloride ion का test, iodine ion का test, nitrate तो is on the second page, sulfate ion का test. ये pair में है, तो I'll just remove this because I've moved it on the second page. ठीक है. ठीक है. Carbonate you already know, so it's not important. So this is the thing you have to figure out or like try to remember or like form new rata on it, because ये आपको पहले नहीं पता था, अब आपको पता है. The second thing is these two sets of equations. सिर्फ hydroxide डाला आपने ammonium के साथ, तो ammonia gas आएगी, which you can test with the ammonia gas का test. Or nitrate ion. This is more of a pair reaction. Think of it that way. And यहाँ पे भी it's या तो आपको white precipitate देगा या yellow precipitate देगा, right? Treat them as one reaction, and that's it for the day. So think of these as 3 reactions you have to learn, and this is very useful, these 2 slides. ठीक है? I don't have notes. I'll try making notes for these. You mean these slides, what I'm writing down? मैं भेज देता हूँ. ठीक है. That's it for the day. I'll also upload this on YouTube. You guys have fun. And bye-bye. I'll see you when? Thursday? 3 to 4? All right, guys. Bye-bye. You guys as well. Bye-bye. Take care.